Is talking about this either. It seems like the role of insulin resistance on cardiovascular disease is a moot point that no one wants to talk about. But the reality of it is, there are many people in the medical field that are looking at this now and re examining why is heart disease still the number one killer. Now, as Dr. Eric Akin is going to explain, he's going to talk about why, as a neurosurgeon, would he even be talking about this? Because it does affect so many aspects of our health. Hey guys, I'm Ken. I'm Coach Ken. I'm up here in Alaska as part of Healthy Together and Feeling Great. And this is part of the ongoing series of trying to put some of the best metabolic health specialists into your YouTube, into your screen, so you can learn what I'm learning each and every time that we get on here. So as we jump into this, I hope that you're going to learn as much as I do. I've learned and just got to see this and hear from Dr. Eric Akin recently, and I'm excited to share this with you and to learn even more from this great presentation that's going to help. I really believe it. Check it out.
Those kind words. I'm going to share my screen here and hopefully I get it right the first time. All right. And let me move this over here. Hopefully this is going to let me move it. I apologize. Oh, now, hang on a minute. I got to do this first, apparently. Okay, now, sorry. Here we go. False start.
It's all good.
All right. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Eric Akin, and you may be wondering, why is a neurosurgeon talking about heart disease tonight? And it is because heart disease right now is probably one of the hottest controversies in all of medicine. In fact, right now in neurosurgery, we don't have anything to fight about, actually. And of course, being a neurosurgeon, we like to get in the middle of the action. But usually when doctors fight about something, it means something is about to change. And I have taken a good hard look at the controversy. I'm on the side of the new way of thinking, and I feel like I should put my shoulder into the shove toward this new model that we have. And so tonight, I'm going to talk about heart disease, but not in the way that most of us have learned it. And this is not a talk about fear. It's not a talk about blame. It's not a talk about clarity, or I should say it is a talk about clarity. And most of us believe that heart disease is caused by one main thing. And that one thing, we kind of got fixated on. Just 2 years before Amy's husband had his first heart attack, there was this landmark study that came out that said that those statin drugs that she was talking about, that her doctor pushed so hard, this major study came out that said that when you cross 40, even if your labs are normal, you should start taking a statin, like a vitamin. It just needs to go on the list of things to take every day. And so all of these doctors, especially cardiologists, became very fixated on this. And it just happened to happen at the time that her husband, who was relatively young at the time, started having some serious issues. For decades, medicine has been focused around almost entirely that one thing. But what I'm going to show you tonight is that the biggest driver of heart disease today isn't what most people think. And once you understand it, a lot of things will suddenly make sense. So heart disease is still the number one cause of death in the United States. And that's true despite decades of cholesterol drugs and blood pressure medicines and stents and bypass surgeries. So the first question we should ask is simple. If we're doing the right thing, why is it still happening? And this doesn't mean that doctors are bad or that medicine has failed, even though that's what Yvette wants you to think. This doesn't, it means that we're focusing too much on late stage fixes instead of the early root cause. And for most of our lives, we've been told a very simple story, that cholesterol clogs arteries, and lower the cholesterol and you have fewer heart attacks. And that idea became so dominant that it shaped food labels, it shaped dietary guidelines and medical visits. But here's the key point, and this is important. Even many of the scientists involved early on admitted that they were not sure that cholesterol intake would actually reduce heart disease at all. They didn't think it even changing the amount of cholesterol that you ate, they didn't think it even changed the numbers on your blood tests. Yet the policies moved forward anyway. And tonight, I'm not saying that cholesterol doesn't matter at all. I'm saying that it was never meant to carry this much weight by itself. So this is where things start to get uncomfortable, especially if you bring it up with cardiologists. But it's also very enlightening. When researchers looked closely at heart attacks, they noticed something surprising, that most heart attacks happen in people whose cholesterol is in the normal range. I want to show you this graph here. The gold line here that you can see in the middle is the cutoff for normal LDL, the so-called bad cholesterol. Now you can see these peaks. These peaks represent people having heart attacks. Notice most of the peaks are on the normal side of that gold line. So how do you explain this? That doesn't mean that cholesterol is meaningless. It means that cholesterol alone is not telling the whole story. And if cholesterol were the main cause, then we would expect that most heart attacks would be on the right side of that gold line. But that's not what is happening. So if cholesterol doesn't explain most heart attacks, we have to ask a better question. What does? So on a population level today, the biggest driver of heart disease is insulin resistance. Insulin resistance affects the majority of adults, and it's estimated about 88%. Even many who look healthy. It quietly damages blood vessels for years before a heart attack ever even happens. And this is why heart disease seems to come out of nowhere. But it wasn't sudden, it was silent. Here's one of the most important ideas of the entire talk. You can have a normal blood sugar, a normal hemoglobin A1C, and a normal LDL, the so-called bad cholesterol, and still have a serious problem. Insulin resistance, in insulin resistance, the body has to make more and more insulin just to keep your blood sugar normal. So glucose looks fine on labs, but insulin is working overtime. Think of insulin like acid in like a pressure hose, like a pressure washer hose. The number on the gauge the pressure gauge looks normal. But if there's acid inside that system, then it's doing damage every single day. Eventually that hose is going to have a major problem. So unfortunately, insulin is rarely measured. If any of you ever had your doctor want to check a fasting insulin level on you, or a glucose tolerance test, or a HOMA-IR, you never hear about these tests being checked for. If all you're checking for is a glucose level, a fasting glucose or a hemoglobin A1C, that's like just having a fire alarm. But wouldn't you like to have like a gas detector or some kind of a detector that tells you that the stove was left on before you have a fire? And we have that in medicine, but we're not using it. So this is where many well-meaning people get a false sense of security. Most doctors check the fasting glucose and the hemoglobin A1C, and if those numbers are normal, the patients are told everything looks fine. But those tests only tell us how well the body is compensating. They don't tell us how hard insulin is working behind the scenes. So someone can be on a collision course toward heart disease, even while being reassured that their labs are normal. And that's not a failure of doctors, it's a limitation of what we're measuring. So insulin isn't just a blood sugar hormone. It has powerful effects on blood vessels. When insulin stays high for years, it raises blood pressure, it damages the inner lining of arteries, it increases inflammation that leads to oxidized cholesterol particles, making them basically radiation to you, not literally, but it makes plaque more likely to form. And this is why insulin resistance shows up everywhere. Heart disease, stroke, kidney disease, not just diabetes. Now I want to show you the blood pressure connection to insulin resistance because high insulin makes blood pressure worse in several ways. First, it tells the kidneys to hold on to salt and water by increasing aldosterone. Aldosterone is this hormone that will just make your kidneys hang on to the water instead of kicking it out through your urinary system. When you retain salt, that increases the blood volume and thereby increases your blood pressure. Second, it reduces nitric oxide, which is what helps blood vessels relax, so vessels stay tighter than they should. Third, over time, insulin causes the artery walls to thicken. Thicker walls means a narrower opening for blood flow through that vessel. Are there any plumbers in here tonight? If you're a plumber, you're familiar with a bit of physics. It's called Bernoulli's equation. And basically, the more narrower the pipe at a constant pressure or at a constant force, which is the force of your heart, the pressure rises. All three of these push blood pressure in the wrong direction, and they start long before a diagnosis is made. Most people imagine plaque forming only on the inside of arteries, like grease in a pipe. But that's not actually how it often starts. Large arteries, they have their own tiny blood supply in the wall itself. If you look right here, this is sort of a blown up section. These are little blood vessels that feed the artery blood. The artery needs its own blood supply. And these are called the vasa vasorum. And these little fragile arteries, they're not built to handle chronic stress. High insulin and inflammation make these tiny vessels leaky. And when these vessels leak into the artery wall, a clot forms. And then those clots become the starting point, a seed for plaque. So the plaque often begins inside the artery wall, not on the surface in the lumen here, like this. It forms in the middle of the wall. So healthy blood vessels have a smooth protective coating on the inside called the glycocalyx. You don't need to remember the term, but you see this is what is represented right here. That is like a slicker. It makes sure that everything flows through that vessel normally, like it should. Think of the glycocalyx as like a fine mist that you see on the grass on a fall morning, cold fall morning. It's very delicate. And if the conditions change at all, like it gets just a 1 degree higher in the temperature, it's gone, right? And that's the same way with the glycocalyx. If you start becoming insulin resistant, it starts to evaporate. And when it does, things don't flow through as well. Chronic inflammation, driven in large part by high insulin, damages that protective layer. When it's stripped away, the vessel becomes irritated, it becomes fragile, small ulcers form inside the artery. Now you got a problem. So let's zoom out and look at the population level. When researchers account for insulin resistance, diabetes, prediabetes, metabolic dysfunction, the numbers are staggering. If insulin resistance disappeared today, we estimate that 60 to 70% of heart attacks in the United States would not happen. Now that's compared to 1% reduction by statin drugs.
Wow.
1% versus almost 70%.
Wow.
That's a huge difference. So that doesn't mean that insulin resistance is the only factor, but on a population level, it's the largest driver of cardiovascular disease. That's why focusing on insulin resistance isn't just helpful, it's essential. So a reasonable question is, if insulin resistance is this important, why don't we hear more about it? We're still looking at the smoke on the ceiling instead of the fire that's burning in the basement. One reason is simple. We tend to keep fighting the last battle that we understood. Cholesterol was easier to measure. It was easier to explain and treat. And once a system is built around one idea, it's hard to change direction. Insulin resistance didn't fit neatly into a single lab value or a single pill or a single projected earnings sheet in a pharmaceutical company's meetings. I said it. Insulin resistance is the problem that we're just now beginning to kind of catch on to. So in the 70s, the United States introduced national dietary guidelines. And what's forgotten is that several of the leading scientists at the time openly said they were not convinced that eating less cholesterol would reduce heart disease. And despite those doubts, the guidelines moved forward and the focus shifted toward low-fat eating, which was a disaster, and away from whole foods. The decision changed how an entire country ate for decades. After that shift, something very important happened, and it wasn't what we had hoped for. The rates of obesity skyrocketed, nearly tripled the number of obese people. Type 2 diabetes exploded, and heart disease did not disappear. And this doesn't mean that the guidelines were evil or unintentional. It means that they missed the real problem. By focusing on cholesterol alone, we took our eyes off insulin resistance and the process quietly damaging arteries long before symptoms ever appeared. When we step back and connect the dots, a clear pattern emerges. Modern heart disease is not just a plumbing problem. It's not just wear and tear, and it's not just cholesterol. It's a metabolic problem. The same process that drives weight gain, pre-diabetes, fatty liver, high blood pressure, and also damaging the arteries. That process is insulin resistance. When you address insulin resistance, you don't just improve one number. Blood pressure goes down, inflammation comes down, vessel linings heal, plaque progression slows or reverses. This is why lifestyle and metabolic interventions can outperform medications over time. Not because medicine is wrong, it has its utility, but because it's often treating the final step instead of the first step. This matters because insulin resistance starts early. It only takes 6 weeks of bad eating to become insulin resistant. And often people have been insulin resistant for decades before labs start turning abnormal. It matters because people are being reassured by normal labs while your doctor is telling you everything is great, but this is going on every single day. You're taking a hit, what we call end-organ damage. And it matters because insulin resistance is modifiable. You can do something about it. So I'm going to leave you with this final statement. When we shift our focus from fear to understanding and from late rescue to early prevention, we can dramatically change the future of heart disease. That is the opportunity in front of us. Thank you.
All right. Dr. Eric Akin does an incredible breakdown. Questions about heart disease and insulin resistance. Man, it's way up there. So make sure that if you haven't subscribed to the channel, that you subscribe. We constantly come up with great lectures like this one. Every single day, I'm replaying different ones and connecting you to some of the very best people in this field that are expanding on insulin resistance. And what we do here at Healthy Together is to focus in on what is those lifestyle changes, not just talking about the big science that Dr. Akin was doing, but to really talk about the actual solutions to exactly what he said. Fixing that diet can fix everything. Just 6 weeks of a bad diet can send everything off. So we work on that here at Healthy Together and Feeling Great so that you have that education. Me and Dr. G work hand in hand to help. If you'd like to reach out to us, leave a comment, make sure that you subscribe. And if you've got questions, don't hesitate to let us know. Where are you guys coming in from, by the way, before I go anywhere? Where are y'all coming in from? I am up Healthy Together and Feeling Great are here in Alaska. And we are focused on helping people with this journey of reversing insulin resistance, of getting on track, of finding that healing. I hope you guys are having a great morning today. And as you're coming in, I hope it's a great one. And let me know where you're coming in from. Folks coming in, if you missed the lecture, this will be up here right after this live is done. So I hope y'all are having an awesome one. Just type in the comments where you guys are coming in from and how things are going. So this whole journey for me started when I was diagnosed with diabetes back in 2023. That was like the complete game changer for me. It was like a punch in the gut that sent me down this road. I never thought I would be in this space. I never thought I would have that issue. I was already a cancer survivor and had already been facing a number of different issues in my own journey in health. And for me, it was, what do I do? I don't know if you've been in that place. Dr. Eric Akin talked about the issues of insulin resistance, primarily the issue of cardiovascular disease, that this issue of heart disease, something that I had high blood pressure. I was 145 over 92. I was born with a heart murmur. Both of my grandfathers died of heart attacks. So the issue of the heart was a huge thing when I was diagnosed with diabetes, of course, the doctor said eat less, move more. 15, 20 years before, I'd been put on metoprolol for high blood pressure. It was now out of control in 2023. So heart disease was a big thing for me. Exercising, working out, every single thing on there. And finding this protocol, finding the root cause of insulin resistance changed my life. And I had to help others. Hey, again, it's kind of caught me there. So welcome in, guys. I'm Coach Ken. I'm up in Anchorage, Alaska. I hope you guys are having an awesome day. Good morning, wherever you're at. Type in the comment where you're coming in from. I'd love to know where people are at. Up here in Alaska, we are 4:54 this morning. So that has been my story. So being able to share these lectures is a huge part of my journey because this protocol saved my life, and I want to do everything I can to help you on your journey. Thanks so much for being here. Go get the day, make it golden. We'll see you back around on the flip side.